Hey everyone, back again. Okay, I want to touch on something now that has kind of been off the radar screen for a while, and that's what's been going on in North Korea. Now, I've been watching this like a lot of people for several years now, but especially in the past 2 years. And I really believe at this point, from what I'm learning, is that I think that possibly the first foreign policy challenge, major challenge that Donald Trump may be facing, is going to be the situation in North Korea. Every president knows when he comes into power that he is going to face at least one foreign policy crisis. I can't think of a president in my lifetime that has not faced at least one major foreign policy crisis or challenge. And I believe that the first one that's coming down the pike is going to be North Korea. Notwithstanding, ISIS blowing something up or whatever, but we're pretty much accustomed to that. We're already engaged in that. Trump will be moving forward with a plan to put a hurting on ISIS. And I'm kind of taking ISIS, unless they do something extraordinary like, a major event like a 9/11 or something like that. But outside the norm of activities associated with the war against ISIS, I think that the issue that's probably going to come pretty much out of nowhere and freak a lot of people out and present a major challenge is going to be North Korea. So let me tell you what's been going on there. As most of you know, North Korea is completely dependent on China. I mean, North Korea is really isolated from the world. They only have really three friends. China, and I'll get more into how much of a friend China is to North Korea these days. They also have a relationship with Iran and Venezuela, but neither Iran or Venezuela are in much of a position to assist or help North Korea in any way other than maybe there's some work between Venezuela and North Korea on maybe some economic things, some trade with the Iranians, or maybe something to do with the nuclear program. But I think that that's probably something the North Koreans are doing for the Iranians. The North Koreans are obviously farther along in their nuclear program than Iran is. So I don't know that Iran's got much that they can offer. And so what we see here is that North Korea being so dependent on China, is always been what we have, used as a way to lean on China to get them to lean on North Korea to bring them into line. North Korea has always been important to China because they are a buffer zone. China does not want to see a reunited, united Korea with North and South Korea uniting because it would be a democratic government, probably allied with the U.S., and that would put NATO and the United States right on China's border. So China likes having that buffer zone. But North Korea has really become like a pebble in their shoe. And if you've ever had a pebble in your shoe, you know what I'm talking about. It's not a big thing, it's a tiny little pebble, but man, it sure is creating a lot of problems for you, and you just want to get rid of it. And the Communist Party in China is also pretty connected to the Communist Party in North Korea. So there's that element too, the Communist Party elements. But what has changed with China and North Korea since the election of the new Chinese president, Xi Jinping or whatever his name is? Something very interesting has happened. Since he was elected president, he has moved away from North Korea. First of all, he has never visited North Korea. Not once. He has visited South Korea, but he's not visited North Korea. He continues to send food and stuff like that, only because he probably doesn't want a humanitarian crisis, and maybe because they don't want North Korea to collapse. But the fact is, 25% of their population is suffering from malnutrition. Many of them die of starvation. They're in a bad way. The economy is really bad, and the new leader, Kim Jong-un, is nothing like Kim Jong-il. With Kim Jong-il, he was at least a rational person the Chinese could deal with him. They could work with him. They could lean on him. They could motivate him to do certain things. But Kim Jong-un, the young guy that's now running North Korea, is nuts, and the Chinese know it, and a lot of other people know it. He doesn't seem to be as cooperative as his father was, and he's nutty, quite honestly. Also, it appears that there are those who have diplomats who have defected from North Korea in the past 2 years, have been giving intelligence agencies a lot of information, and that information seems to suggest that there are certain people in North Korea in the hierarchy who also are very unhappy with Kim Jong-un, and they are concerned about him. And of course, the situation there is just getting worse and worse and worse. So it looks like with China pulling their support, and also we had this leaked memo. Don't forget about the leaked memo we had 2 years ago, back in 2014. There was a Chinese military document that was leaked essentially, to a Japanese journalist. And we can assume, because it's China and it was leaked from the military, that it's probably because they wanted it leaked to the military. Maybe to send a message to Kim Jong-un, or maybe it was a real leak. But we learned from that China already has a plan in place, a contingency plan for what to do in case that regime collapses in North Korea. They're obviously not going to allow the United States just to move in there and take over. They'll get there before anyone else does, and they'll know about that going down before anybody else does. The question is, do they let it happen, or do they try to step in? There's also a rumor that the Chinese did try to have someone, either someone who was within the power structure, the hierarchy in North Korea. They did try to possibly set up a coup or an assassination of Kim Jong-un, but apparently the North Korean leader found out about that and executed this guy. And that may have something to do with why the relations are not so good. So there's these things going on, but the situation in North Korea, bottom line, it's nearing its end with Kim Jong-un. We're very, very close. I think probably within the next 4 years, within Donald Trump's first 4-year term, I believe that we are going to see something major happen with North Korea. Because once they lose China as a supporter, and it's pretty obvious that they have, based on the actions of the Chinese president, it's just a matter of time. And the question, I think, for China and for a lot of intelligence agencies around the U.S., around the world, are exactly how to deal with such a problem. Obviously, the Chinese, and probably even the South Koreans, are terribly concerned about a massive, massive refugee crisis. Because if the regime collapses, you're going to have a lot of problems. Because keep in mind the type of society that you have in North Korea. These people are literally living in another world. They do not even understand the world that they live in. And they are completely, completely dependent upon the government there in North Korea. It's how they've been, created. They don't know that they can do anything for themselves. You're talking about many millions and millions of people who already have a issue with food and things like that. So you could have a real refugee crisis on your hands. And another thing that I know that a lot of intelligence agencies, including in China, the U.S., and others, are obviously having to try to deal with is, what do you do with all these people in North Korea? They've spent their entire life believing that their leader is a demigod. The people in North Korea believe that their leader was brought to them by supernatural birth, that he performs magic, that he's essentially a god, that he's this being that's essentially like what we look at in the West as a god. So they don't even know that we've landed on the moon. they don't know anything about the world outside of North Korea. They live in such a uh, a fantasy land of lies, that how are all the millions and millions and millions of people, how would they deal with the reality of the world that they live in if that regime collapses and all of a sudden they are exposed to the truth about the world that they live in based on all them years of hardcore brainwashing? Would it even be possible to get those people to accept the new reality of the truth of the world that they live in? Could they even accept it? Remember, these people, when they see their dear leader, I mean, they cry. I mean, they think he's a god. These people you might see millions of people committing suicide. I mean, so it's a mess. What to do with all those people after the regime collapses. How to deal, because I don't think the world has ever dealt with a situation like that before. We have millions and millions and millions of people who are just completely detached from any type of reality. How you would get those people to, it's not like you can, not like the Russian collapse where, the Russian people knew that they were being fed a lot of claptrap, and so they had no problem adjusting to the new reality. They never believed the propaganda that was fed to them anyway. But that's not true in North Korea. And so it's just a situation no one's ever had to deal with before that I'm aware of in the history of the world, that anyone has ever had to deal with a massive number of people under such massive brainwashing. So it's certainly something to watch, but I generally don't like to make a lot of predictions. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have any real inside information. I just watch international issues very closely. It's one of my main interests. And watching North Korea, I would say that Donald Trump's first foreign policy crisis could very likely be North Korea. I'm sure his intelligence people are probably aware of that, probably looking for that, looking for how they're going to handle the situation. Be very interesting. I don't think that we're going to try to challenge China, over North Korea. I think that's very interesting. How we're going to handle that? Are we just going to allow China to go in and prop up a new leader in North Korea and try to keep the same game going? Are they going to try to introduce these people to reality? And how's that going to go? And are we just going to sit back and allow that to happen? Are we going to challenge China for North Korea? Will it be an international issue? Just there's so many unknowns in the North Korean situation. But things have reached critical mass there. I don't expect that this is going to happen tomorrow or next week, but I do believe within the next 4 years, within Donald Trump's first term as president, we are going to see things finally shake themselves out in North Korea. It looks like it's trending that way. There's a lot of signs that point to the situation there is finally coming to a head. So we'll have to watch that very carefully. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. If you haven't looked into what's going on in North Korea recently, there's some pretty good YouTube videos. There's some good information out there. So if you are interested and you want to take a look at that, it's fairly interesting to look into. So you might want to do that. Otherwise, that's basically all I got for today. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. Y'all take care. Bye.